So the question is, could the United States be in an analogous position in terms of relative decline? And then you say, okay, who would replace the U.S.? One possibility is Europe. Europe has the capacity in terms of total size when it acts as a unit, in terms of human resources, in terms of technology. Europe is a potential contender. It lacks one thing, and that's unity. And the question of how much unity we're going to have, so how soon, I don't think it's going to be that soon. A second contender might be Russia. Russia still has a nuclear arsenal on the scale of that of the United States, and Russia has aspirations. But on the other hand, when you look at Russia, I think you could see that this is a country that is in decline. It's in demographic decline, as I already mentioned, and its economy is based on energy exports. 2/3 of its exports are oil and gas. And it's got such a corrupt system that it can't re-engineer its domestic economy to make it a more effective modern economy. So I don't see Russia as a contender. India is possible. I mentioned that India is likely to be the largest country in the world in terms of population. But India has a long way to go still. It's profiting from 7% plus rates of economic growth. But India's economy of $2 trillion, the US is an economy of $20 trillion. And if India is going to catch up, even if it's not just catching up with the US, it's got to use more of its human resources. 1/3 of Indian women are illiterate. That's a terrible waste of human resources, if nothing else. So I don't think India is a contender, and that brings us back to where we started, China. So the question then is China going to become the replacement for the US, either in the Thucydides version or the Kindleberg version? My view is that China is not about to pass the US. China is a $12 billion economy. The US, as I mentioned, $20 billion. Some people like to say, but if we use purchasing power parity, China's already bigger. Problem with that is you don't import jet engines or oil at purchasing power parity. You import it by exchange rates. But China is definitely doing well. It's done extremely well. I suspect it'll continue to grow despite a number of problems that have been identified. The Chinese sometimes talk about the problem of growing old before they grow rich. But the problem is not one where I think China is going to be quickly passing the US. China, as I said, may pass the US in total size sometime in the 2030s. In per capita income, it'll still be roughly a quarter of the US as it is now. And that's a measure of the sophistication of an economy. And in terms of military power, while China has been greatly increasing its military budget, it's still only 1/4 of the American military budget. And in terms of soft power, where China has been placing a great deal of emphasis on the power to attract rather than coerce and pay, China has problems. One is it can't fully unleash the talents of its civil society. And the other is it has a lot of territorial conflicts with neighbors, which make it look threatening. The net result of that is the Portland consultancy, which does a index of soft power that it calls the Soft Power 30, which it produces annually, ranks China about 28th on soft power, not about to pass the US. Now, why is that of some importance? It's importance because it means that we probably don't have to worry as much about the Thucydides trap as people think. When you go back to the example of Britain and Germany on the eve of World War I, it's worth remembering that Germany had already passed Britain by 1900. So Germany was not just on Britain's heels, it was overcoming. If the numbers that I gave you tonight, and which are at greater detail in this book, Is the American Century Over? If those numbers are correct, China's not just about to pass the US. If that's true, we have time to manage this relationship. We don't have to succumb to fear. And if you go back to the original proposition by Thucydides, remember it had two parts: the rise in the power of and the fear it created in. We don't have to succumb to that fear because it's not something which is about to lead to overcoming or overpassing. So that pushes us back into this question of, will China become a responsible stakeholder? Will we avoid the Kindleberger trap? And I'm going to submit to you that actually the prospects for that are reasonable. If you look at China, China has tried not to overthrow the liberal international order, but to benefit from it. John Eikenberry, the Princeton political scientist, has made this point. He said, unlike, let's say, Nazi Germany, which is a revisionist power, which wanted to overthrow the system, so to speak, to kick over the table, China wants a seat at the table and wants to win more at the table for China, naturally, doesn't want to destroy the table because it's actually doing pretty well at the table. So in that sense, Xi Jinping, when he addressed the World Economic Forum at Davos in January, said that China had a strong interest in preserving the open international trading system. Donald Trump may have pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord. Xi Jinping has not. And if you go back to behavior of China before 2016, you'll notice that China has been able and willing to cooperate on global public goods. China and the US were at loggerheads in 2009 on climate issues. That led to the Copenhagen sessions of the UN climate group to fail, or not to succeed is a polite way to put it. If you look at Paris in 2015, Obama and Xi had reached an agreement on how they would approach this, which helped with excellent French management of the process in Paris, and with solid European support, which helped produce a success at Paris. So from 2009 to 2015, China and others went from being free riders to setting up a framework for producing global public goods in the climate area. Or to give you another example, also in 2015, the United States and China had been at loggerheads over rules for cyberspace, each accusing the other of unfair practices. And the United States said, all right, we're both going to spy on each other. Nations have always spied on each other. Having an agreement not to spy is not very useful. But we could get an agreement not to spy for commercial purposes. In other words, you don't steal the intellectual property of another country's company and give it to your own company, because that's unfair and unbalances the global trading system. The Chinese very dubious about this, but they changed their position. And in 2015, September 2015, Obama and Xi reached an agreement that they would not use cyber espionage for commercial purposes, and they took that agreement to the group of 20 major economies and got a broad support for it. That, again, I would submit, is cooperation in producing a global public good. So the interesting question of whether it's possible, well, I don't want to leave you with that. There's also the possibility that China won't cooperate, and China's rejection of the Law of the Sea Tribunal settlement or judgment relating to the South China Sea is a case where China didn't cooperate. in producing a global public good. So I don't want to say there are no problems with China. I'm just saying that the view that China is not going to participate in this system because it wasn't invented here and they're going to kick it all over, that's not quite right.